Hello, everyone. I'm Meredith Goldstein, writer of the Love Letters advice column and host of its podcast, also called Love Letters. Welcome to the 10th episode of Taking Care, which is a series where we talk to mental health professionals and advocates about what we're experiencing during this pandemic. Past episodes have been about healthy screen time, things like music therapy, how music can help us, how children are experiencing isolation and being home a lot with their families. And actually, I think our last episode featured David Bluestein, a Boston College professor who talks about work and identity and how much, how essential workers are experiencing this pandemic, what it means to lose a job, what it means to see a profession completely change because of certain industries, being affected by the last few months. I highly recommend that episode. I learned so much. You can watch all of the videos if you want to. If you want like a big self-care mental health day, there are 10 of them, and it's bostonglobe.com/takingcare. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome representatives from Start Strong, which is a program that falls under the umbrella of the Boston Public Health Commission. And I have long been obsessed with Start Strong because I write a relationship column, and Start Strong basically works with young people to teach them how to have healthy relationships. And every time I learn about a Start Strong lesson or program, my great wish is that adults can all just sit in and get the same education too. So many of us could benefit from what young people learn because of what Start Strong does. My favorite thing that they do, which is very on brand for me, is that they have a breakup summit every summer where they talk to teens about healthy ways to break up. And since I've received many letters every day, especially during this pandemic, from people who have experienced the loss of a romantic relationship during this time, I think that breakup classes are a great idea. So I thought to talk to Start Strong today because as things open up more and we enter phase 2 in Massachusetts, at least, of being able to do things in the world, I'm having a really hard time navigating boundaries. I'm a little bit of a people pleaser. I love my friends. So when I'm invited to do something, I really want to go, but maybe because I have a chronic illness, and asthma, I have a sister with a chronic illness, I might not feel safe going. And even though I am 43 years old, I have trouble speaking like a grown-up about my boundaries. And I think that everyone, no matter what your age is, it can be difficult to talk about uncomfortable things. So Start Strong, I knew, would be the exact organization to help me. So I want them to introduce themselves, but Jess, why don't we start with you and tell us about what you do in the program, and maybe we can just go around and tell us about yourself and how you're related to Start Strong.
Cool. Hi, everyone. It is really exciting to be here, and we love Meredith, so we're super stoked to be on a podcast and be live and not see other people's faces but ours. So it's more just like we're talking to our friends, which eases the anxiety. I'm Jess, and I'm the director of Start Strong. I've been with Start Strong for 10 years now, which is amazing and crazy and wonderful. As Meredith mentioned, we're a high school peer leadership program that aims to prevent teen dating violence and promote healthy relationships. And what we do is we train our young people in high school to become experts in the field of dating violence prevention, healthy relationship promotion over the course of 6 weeks, 25 hours a week. And we do that by a trauma-informed framework, positive youth development principles, and it's all kind of housed within social cognitive theory. And so the idea is once our young people become experts, they're able to train both their peers and adults who work with young people in the field of what we do. And so I don't want to talk about all the things we do. I'll let the rest of the team share about our events and some of our work with media. And I'm really excited to be here, excited to talk through some questions and see what happens.
And who do you want to hand off to?
I would love to hand it off to Manasia, who I have known now for also about 10 years, which is amazing.
Hi, I'm Manasia. I started Start Strong in 2014 when I was 14 years old. Now I'm 21. I have been with the program. So I graduated when I was 18, and then I kind of never left. None of my coworkers kind of ever left. Jess and a lot of the staff from the commission keep us informed and keep us with things about it. So even though, yes, we have graduated from like healthy relationships and preventing teen dating violence, because of Start Strong and the commission as a whole, we have now taken this on to our lives and like the things that we want to do. So for example, like I'm going into public health, but in chemistry, and I know my friends are going into psychiatry, and it's all not because of this program, but this program has helped shape us a lot. So and when I like to talk about Start Strong, I love to talk about like the nitty gritty, but I also like to talk about like where it took us from inner city youth into something that's really bigger. So I value this program for that.
And who would you like to hand off to?
Cindy.
Hey everybody, my name is Cindy Wong, and I'm one of the program managers for Start Strong. I lead the in-school portion. What's actually interesting is that I started in this January, and I was in office for all of maybe a month and a half before we switched to working from home because of COVID. So when we talk about boundary setting, we talk about, healthy relationships, I think it's been a really interesting journey, just trying to visualize what that looks like, being in the office to now being entirely virtual and needing to learn how to do that virtually. But yeah, I'm excited to be here and to just chat with you all. And Takia.
Hey everyone, my name is Takia Brown. I am the program manager for Start Strong, and I work primarily with our young people in our after school settings. So that means once our young people go through our summer program and they're all trained up and they're ready to go, I'm the person that's there with them on the ground when they're out in the community talking to other young people and carrying out those trainings. In addition to that, our young people work very closely around media literacy. And so we have lots of media tools that we use to help them dissect the music that they listen to, the videos that they watch, and to think about the type of messaging that they're getting from that content, and then how they would like that content to maybe better represent what their relationships are actually like, or how they might want to think about adjusting their media diet based off of the assessments that they make after using our media tools to look at that content, the songs or the videos. In addition to that, our young people have been very much involved with creating their own media. Anyone can go over to thehallsboston.com to have an in-depth look at what our young people have done. But this is a web series that they made about dealing with issues around masculinity and relationships. And it was completely led by them. They had everything to do from designing the focus group questions and pulling out salient themes, and then deciding what the script was going to be, to advocating for the production company, and then acting in and being very much involved with the filming and promotion of that web series. So again, check out thehallsboston.com for more information about that. But that's definitely one of our pride and joys, is our attention to media literacy and letting our young people really take the helm and be the force behind what it is that we do at Start Strong.
Great. I want to kick this off with a question before we get to reader questions. And just so you know, some people did submit questions ahead of time when they RSVP'd, but you are absolutely welcome to submit a question now. And there's a little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So please feel free to fill it in and ask a question if it occurs to you during this talk. But Maneja, maybe you can speak to this the best. I'm sort of wondering about the experience younger people are having. It seems like a universal experience we're all having is, wait, my rules don't match your rules, for pandemic, for leaving your house or ordering takeout or seeing a friend. How are younger people experiencing this, who are around you, who you talk to? I know you can't speak for everyone, but I am getting text from friends who are in their 30s and 40s saying, well, wait, I'm looking on Instagram and I'm seeing people out, and I'm seeing people at bars, and I'm seeing people hanging out. And this is making me sad. Why can they do this and why can't I? So is this universal? Are younger people experiencing this too?
I think my view on everything that is happening is coming from an academic standpoint, because I have a lot of friends that are in college as I'm in college, and it's a lot of individualism, especially in our country today. We don't have collective thoughts. Like, we don't have a collective and that's what we're learning. And especially having conversations on Twitter, even this morning with one of my friends who said that they were afraid to go back to class because they don't know if they will be able to focus. So a lot of us aren't even worried about like going out, because me personally, I have 2 older parents. So I cannot just keep going in and out. Like, it's all about the individual and what is happening. But I have friends who live alone, and they believe that if they get the disease, they're gonna survive it and it's gonna be okay. So at the same time, like, I can only speak to the academic standpoint, and a lot of us are just like worried about school. Like, I find out if my school is going to be in tomorrow or anything that else is going on, because like and also like older, and I have to explain this to my parents a lot, like, we have no idea what's going to happen after this, like if I'm going to be able to get a job, or if, so that's like what we're like on the side that I see a lot, but I don't see a lot of like the going out and like the things, because one, I'm in Boston, and like a lot of my friends aren't really past phase 1 or phase 0, I would say.
Yeah, I'm like phase negative too. And that's because, you know, of my situation. But even with that, and this could be a question for any of you really, I'm shocked at how difficult I'm finding it to just say, hey, I'm uncomfortable with that. And it wouldn't have occurred to me that that I would be bad at this, that I would have difficulty saying no to people I care about. One of the things that keeps happening to me is that I will tell a friend, oh, you know what, I don't think I'm comfortable with that. And they will respond by sending me a link to an article that explains why it's safe. And actually, you know, Takia, you mentioned media diets, and this is actually a really good time to talk about it, because I am sure right now, as we learn more about this virus, you can find an article that says one thing and then a completely different article that says another. And this has been changing by the week, and somebody will send me something from March and it's different in June. So, you know, I don't know, Takia, if you want to speak to this about, I mean, there are 2 questions here. One is about how the media is used to sort of inform the choices we make, but also why it's so difficult to set a boundary and then accept someone's boundary, even though we're all, you know, I'd like to think everyone in my life is a caring, empathetic person.
Absolutely. I think the one thing is this, right, is that, like you mentioned, this is a rapidly changing situation. And on a daily basis, just as humans, we make calculated risk decisions about everything that we do. And so I think maybe being able to dial it back with families and friends and things like that to say, I understand, and that's a risk that you're willing to take, and we all take risk, and like that's what you're willing to do. But for me right now, because this is a rapidly changing situation, and from March to June, things have been up in the air or different at different time points, I would rather do this. This is the decision that I'm making. And I think some of it is kind of just getting clear with yourself about what that looks like and how that might sound, communicating that to other people, maybe before we have those conversations. I think a lot of times we might not realize how much power we actually have before heading into a conversation, just by getting clear on what we're actually comfortable with and being centered around that, and then being able to communicate that back out to friends and family. Another thing that I find unique about this situation with COVID in particular is that it has a lot to do with your personal health and well-being, which are conversations that we usually don't have to maybe with friends or family to say, you know, I have asthma, I have type 2 diabetes, or I have this issue here. It's not something that we would actually have to talk about. So having to even talk about those personal health risks or things that may put you at a higher risk are in and of itself like a difficult thing to kind of navigate, but maybe having that conversation with that friend or family member from that standpoint. Like, the risk that I'm willing to take is going to look different from the risk that you're willing to take, and that's really based off of how I'm personally situated within this situation. So if you could understand and respect that this is why I'm making this decision, and even though this article may say X, Y, and Z, I just don't feel comfortable with it based off of where I'm from, and then maybe that person can come into the conversation from that standpoint and be a little bit more understanding. Because I think that in conversations that I've even had with friends and family members, I've heard things like, well, I'm just not going to be in fear. I'm not going to live my life like this. And again, I'll say a lot of that has to do with the fact that, you know, this is a major shift for us society-wise. And with any public health major shift, it takes a long time to actually implement behavior change. And we want to think about the fact that this is something that we've been trying to do as a country for 90 plus days. And so like, it's very new for everybody. So it's not surprising to me that people are struggling with it or going back and forth and really trying to test out what those boundaries are going to look like, especially when we don't really have like a national consensus or laws and things like that around us to kind of help aid in the process to get us all on the same page. And what comes to mind for me is when I think about like seatbelt laws. Like this is not a seatbelt law, but thinking about that and like how long it took to get the behavior change there. And then what did we have as a society set up in place to help us all get there? How did the federal laws change? How did car manufacturing change? What happened to help ease us into that process? We're just not there yet. We're still very, very early on in the COVID behavior change, population health change part of this whole situation.
I hadn't even thought about the sort of, much more intimate conversations we're having with people about our health background. And it occurs to me the number of times I've mentioned that my sister has Crohn's disease in the past few months, and then explaining what that is, it wouldn't have come up organically. And I imagine those are some conversations that are easier for some than for others. So thank you for bringing up that point. When you do a program and you talk to teens about setting healthy boundaries, and I don't know, Jess, if you want to take this one, because you've done this for 10 years. What are some of the things you say about making yourself clear and feeling comfortable asking for what you want and what you don't want? Like, what can adults learn from the lessons you teach younger people that some of us missed out on?
Yeah, I like that question about boundaries because it's one that I think subconsciously always exists for all of us, because we're always trying to understand and wrap our minds around what that boundary means in this particular place and time with this particular person at 7 o'clock versus at 8 o'clock. And because it's always ebbing and flowing, it's difficult to kind of get this natural grasp on it so you can sustain that answer, since it is evolving at all times. So it's because it starts strong, we like to really emphasize what we call the 3 C's, which are consent, communication, and critical thinking. It's not so much saying, here's what you need to do or what you can. It's more saying like what you can do, and let's explore what's going to make the most sense for you. So we really encourage folks to not only have empathy with others, but empathy with themselves, and figuring out what are your boundaries. And by that, it's what are your parameters? What's your tummy say about this moment? What's that gut check? Where did this come from? Where did you learn this? Where have you seen it? What are your friends doing? And it's asking a lot of the questions so that our young people can start to dissect and analyze how they want to approach each situation and why. And as long as they're internally understanding it, they don't have to explain it to anybody, because they're going to feel confident and assured that they know where they're coming from and they know what their needs are. And so that's what we try to foster and cultivate, our conversations around self-reflection and internal exploration.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I want to get to some reader questions. And by the way, if you all feel like, oh, I have no answer to that question, or, you are welcome to say that. But these are starting points for conversations in general. And I think all the questions that have been submitted so far represent experiences I think many people are having. So a reader asks, do you have advice, strategies for encountering people who disregard social distancing and or don't wear masks? 2 scenarios. 1, neighbors in a condo complex who apologize and then keep forgetting to put a mask on and maintain distance. 2, strangers encountered when out shopping or walking. Thanks. And this is, when we were preparing for this, I was saying that I'm constantly baffled by when I see 2 people together like a couple and one person has the mask on and another person doesn't. And I'm like, what are the rules in that household? I don't understand what's happening. But I think there is, for people who are really, concerned and following the rules, to see other people not following the rules, it's like hard to know how to react to that. Is it your responsibility to say, hey, person, put your mask on? Is it none of your business? Do you just walk in the other direction? And I imagine a lot of people are internalizing a lot of anger when they see that. So I don't know who wants to take that question. Cindy, we haven't heard from you.
Yeah, when I think about folks encountering others on the streets, and maybe shouldn't I, ask them to wear a mask, I think we also need to be cognizant that that person that you're talking to may react with anger. And so recognizing that, this person could be reacting maybe not in a very, the most understanding way, like that's the risk that you have to consider taking as well. One thing that I always talk to the young people about, especially when we talk about conflict resolution, is, be mindful of your tone, be mindful of what you're asking for. It's any sort of relationship 101, right? Is if you are asking someone for something, watch your tone, watch your pitch, watch your volume, make sure that you're coming across in a sort of understanding way too, an empathetic way. Like, I understand like be a little bit uncomfortable wearing a mask because it's really hot out right now. It's like 90 degrees all the time. It's really humid. And also understanding and letting them know that, well, here's what's happening. And, we're not exactly in the clear yet with COVID. And it'd be really great. Like, I would really appreciate it if you wear a mask. I think coming from that direction, I feel can be a lot easier and more acceptable than coming at it like, oh my God, you're not wearing a mask. What the hell? It's bound to just feed off of energy, like if you come across, not the most gentle, the person's also going to reciprocate in the same way.
I also think it's interesting, and I'm sure the majority of people watching this are Massachusetts, New England people. We might have people from further beyond, but, I live in a neighborhood where I would say 99% of the people I see, even the runners, are wearing masks. I feel very lucky about that. I don't know why that is. I have a friend who lives in the North End, and she said, depending on the day, it's a whole different, it's just, and I think, we all start to borrow the habits of what we see around us. So it doesn't surprise me that this becomes, well, if I saw my neighbor doing this, I feel a little bit more comfortable doing that. And Takia, you have, what you said is far more empathetic than I had been about giving people time for a learning curve. Because I can also remember the first few weeks of this where we were told not to wear masks unless we felt like we were having symptoms. So I assume also what people are doing involves what media they're consuming, the pictures they see online, what other people in their lives are doing. So yeah, Cindy, it seems really important that you would start by saying, okay, in this house, let's do this. In this unit, let's, this is why I need it. But with some understanding. Okay. So another reader asks, this is like my constant thought. What if the visitor to the barbecue asks to use the bathroom? How could one deny this request? And as we're approaching July 4th weekend, I think this is something to think about. And I think Takia is going to have an answer for this, but I try to figure out how to communicate to people before they come to my lawn about what might happen, but I'm actually very concerned about, well, what if they get here and they have a need and I don't feel comfortable fulfilling it? So what can people do to ensure that when they do have social time, it meets their needs?
For sure. I think, so one thing is kind of being very clear and upfront with the guest about what the expectations and guidelines are going to be around interacting at your home. And maybe sending that out to the guest ahead of time. And of course, getting clear with yourself about what am I comfortable with? What am I not comfortable with? How would I like this to look? And then, giving this to the guests ahead of time so that they can make a decision about whether or not this is something that they want to then engage with after knowing what the parameters are. That kind of really alleviates some of the stress of having to have this uncomfortable conversation on the spot and not really knowing, while giving your guests agency over the experience that they want to have on the day of. I would also suggest maybe saying, my bathroom will be closed, but we are right next to this public restaurant. If you go and buy a drink or something like that, I'm sure you can use the restroom there. Maybe trying to have some other options in place so that, again, guests can think about what they might do, in a situation that might come up. So that way you have kind of laid out what the parameters are, given some options, and then guests get to then in turn take that information and do what with it that they feel is best for them. So again, just options are key. And that's something that we talk about a lot at Start Strong when it comes to like partner negotiation and like how you're going to figure things out. I'm comfortable with this. This is what I have to say, allowing your partner to then digest that information and say what they're comfortable with, and then arriving at some consensus together. So not unlike how you would negotiate anything else with a partner, but this is friends or family and saying, hey, here's what it is, here's what we can do, and then seeing what happens from there.
And of course, I imagine there are some people who are much more open, talking about this via text. Like Nasia, I don't know if friends your age are like much more, like if you would text about like bathroom stuff, like with my family members. I mean, my Aunt Nancy was here the other day. I have no qualms about saying what's going to happen if you need to pee. Like I'm not embarrassed by it. She's my family member, but again, we're suddenly talking about these like very intimate things that we would have never talked about, which is, are you going to have to go to the bathroom and where? Or do you find that are there different ways in which people in your world are more comfortable having these conversations? Like one could be by email, one could be by phone. What are you finding works, and for clarity purposes?
And I think all my friends are like this, and I think it's a thing that I'm learning about young people in general too around me. We're very upfront. I had friends come over my house, and I told them from the beginning, like, use the bathroom before you come in, because we're gonna stay on the porch and we're gonna grill out there, and like we can wash our hands on the outside, but like you cannot come in the house. And it's just a boundary that I set, because at the end of the day, it will be my family that's affected. Something's gonna happen to us. So just setting, and also like checking my privilege. Like if I have a friend who has a bathroom issue or something, should I be inviting that person over to my house? And it's little things like that, because oftentimes, and me and my friends have conversations about like checking our privilege. Like I am a cisgender heterosexual female who is also, I'm able to walk on my 2 feet. So therefore, there's a lot of things that I don't have to think about, but I have a lot of friends who might be handicapped in many different ways, and inviting them over my house might be more detrimental to them than beneficial. So also having those conversations with your friends and open up the dialogue of having uncomfortable conversations. Because oftentimes we feel like, well, if this is too uncomfortable, I don't want to talk about it. But like, it's life and death for some people, and the people that are being infected with the disease is disproportionately affecting others. So therefore, in my community, I have neighbors that have died and stuff that has happened. And it's just like, it's no longer a conversation anymore. It's just, these are my boundaries and I'm setting them because this is how I want to live my life. And just like Takia said, with anything in your life, I think we need to start opening the dialogue of having uncomfortable conversations, because for me to be able to be comfortable in a situation and for you to be able to be comfortable, we have to have uncomfortable conversations. And it's important. And I think it's important that we start to normalize this, that we start to normalize asking important questions or checking our privilege when we're doing certain things, especially when people are coming to our house and whatnot. Not only should you think about, oh, is somebody going to use the bathroom, but also think about, is everybody going to be able to get into your house? Other things you can start to think about when you start thinking about the little things, and it opens up a broader conversation about how you can affect or help other people too.
Well, it's a great point. And I do hope that something that comes out of this is a better dialogue and way of speaking about chronic illnesses, about, I think there was really crass and terrible language in the beginning of this where, you'd hear on the news and these sort of blanket statements of, oh, well, this only affects people with pre-existing conditions, right? And like, I don't know that I know anybody who doesn't have a pre-existing condition, at least in my world. And this idea that suddenly people, this ableist talk that made a lot of people feel disposable in a way that was, I think, really problematic and to some extent has continued. But what actually came out of it in my world is a lot of people saying, oh, wait, I'm under this umbrella and here's how it worked for me. And here's what I need to be healthy. And here's what I need from you. And Nasia, I hope you're right that like what comes out of this is a deep respect and less dismissal of some of the things we don't see automatically. That hopefully. And this goes into the next reader question a little bit. A reader has asked, I'm always seeking advice on how to make boundaries clear with humor, but in a way that people take it seriously. I don't want to come across as too serious or uptight, because I'm not. It's just that I struggle with telling people my boundaries. And them giving me a hard time about it by criticizing me and making me feel bad. This person says, I know no one can make you feel inferior without your consent, and I'm working on that, just looking for some tips on how to create boundaries with humor. And I think it's interesting that this person feels the need to make it humorous, because I've done it too, right? Where you're like, I have gone to a place where to address something, I've become self-deprecating. like, oh, I'm probably being paranoid about my asthma, but but in fact, I'm not being paranoid, and this is a need, right? So, what, I don't know if anybody wants to speak about that instinct we have to make a joke, sometimes at our own expense, or to be worried that we're being too serious, or coming off the wrong way, when in fact, we're just stating what we need.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, the first thing that struck a chord with me is that plenty of people have made me upset without my permission. I mean, that's just kind of what happens when someone's mean. So that phrase, it's okay to feel hurt, it's okay to have a number of complex feelings, especially because our world was kind of cultivated so that we don't necessarily have to set boundaries. We can ghost somebody, we can just ignore those difficult conversations, and now we don't have that opportunity or that luxury or privilege, as Manesia said. And as for wanting to use humor, that resonates with me a tremendous amount. I love telling jokes. I struggle with uncomfortable conversations. I've already made a million bad jokes in my head during this conversation, and thank goodness there's a microphone that I can mute, because none of them would land well. They're just not good. But that said, this is an opportunity to exercise like our own personal growth and our own commitment to our safety and our well-being. And we don't need to justify that. If you're not comfortable, if you don't want to do it, we can make a statement, and that is unbelievably difficult. And if you want to add like a gender lens when you view this, you can, and some inequities that have happened there, racial lens, inequities and imbalances, power dynamics. There's a lot that can be unpacked and a lot that can go into this one moment. But I think lessons that have worked for me are, if somebody makes fun of me or doesn't appreciate my boundary, then I like to ask a lot of questions, because it puts them on the spot and it encourages them to reflect on some of their behavior. And at the very least, they're going to feel as uncomfortable as I'm feeling, because, well, now I'm uncomfortable. So we're going to have to tease this out together, and just setting that stage to understand yourself and your own worth in this. And like Manesia was saying too, like, it is life or death for some people, and you don't need to justify that. This is what's going to make you comfortable. It's what's going to make you feel right. I sanitize all my groceries. I don't necessarily have to do that, but I do. And it takes an hour every time. And I go through a lot of wipes, and it feels weird, but that's what I'm going to do. And I don't care how many articles you send me. It feels right. It feels good. And I feel like I have control over a situation that is utterly controlless. So I'm gonna take what I can.
And thank you to that question asker, because I feel like that's such a universal thing, right? Especially for people who are good at making jokes, right? To be like, okay, I'm gonna make this conversation easier for everyone with a joke, but it's not so great when it comes at your expense. So, and just for the record, I'm jealous you have wipes and that you have access to wipes. I mean, my gosh, it's hard to get some.
It was like a moment at CVS. I walked in, I saw them, and I just beelined. You could only get one, and I took it.
Right, you took your one.
I paid.
And you bring up something too when you talk about the grocery disinfecting, and I know they've talked about, well, maybe it's not surfaces, or maybe it's the rules with this, because we don't have like one stream of messaging. Everybody does seem to have their own special rules, and it almost reminds me of superstition, right? Well, this has worked from the beginning. And I know some people who will not get takeout. They will not get takeout. And I do get takeout, but I will not get cold takeout. I will only get hot takeout. And, you know, I don't know. I mean, this is more of a general psychological question, but talking about someone you love having a routine that doesn't match yours, and the acceptance of that, which carries over to everything else in life. You know, we date people that our friends would not date. We study things our friends would not study. You know, I don't know who wants to field this question, but what is the sort of grown-up skill that some of us dropped during this that says, this is okay for you, but it's not for me, and go have your salad and I'll have my hamburger? I mean, you know, like, how can we get better at this right now? Because what I have decided is life and death for me is it might not be the case, and it doesn't have to be the rules for everyone else. Like I think right now we all agree on the mask, but that's one of the few things everybody agrees on for the most part. Cindy, do you want to take this? I hope that question was clear enough.
I'm gonna answer based off of what my understanding of the question was.
Okay.
I think, what we've been talking a lot about is a culture shift. And within that general culture shift of, putting on a mask, about following social distancing guidelines, all these things that, the CDC has put out, there's also individual cultures that we have to take into consideration, So for example, speaking about, thinking about intergenerational households, depending racially where you sit, is the culture you come from more collectivist? Is it more individualist? What does that look like? But also now we're talking about sort of the culture of like eating out or not. I think, and to kind of tie it all together, one thing that I really thought about as you were talking was about the concept of self-agency, and the little bit of control that folks have over their lives, whether that's eating out and maintaining that new normal. It's also respecting that. No, and at the same time, respecting your own agency and saying no. We're talking about, self-agency, and we're talking about boundary setting. I think, those are very heavily intertwined during these times. There's also talking to folks like, hey, maybe you should put on a mask. That'd be great. But recognizing too that even though you say so, they may not do it because that's their self-agency to do what they please. So that's how I understood the question that you just mentioned.
Well, and thank you for making one of those points, because it brings us to another reader question. One reader asked how to talk about boundaries with elderly parents. And I think no matter the age, actually, I've heard from a lot of people who are deeply frustrated with their parents and vice versa. Maybe it's about they want to see, they don't feel comfortable seeing their parents because they don't want to put them at risk, and the parents don't understand. Maybe the parents are practicing different rules within families. How does this look in terms of negotiation between whether you're in the same household or in multiple households? It's different than saying no to a friend.
I can answer to some of that. I have my siblings recently just had a baby. So, and also like my parents again. So what I did personally is I quarantined myself in my house for 2 weeks. I know I did not go anywhere, but as a newborn mother, I knew that my sister would appreciate it if I stayed in the house, did what I was supposed to do. Then I went to go visit the baby. And then I went to go do what I was supposed to do. So again, back to what Cindy was saying about self-agency, about like making those boundaries with your family members. Like my dad says, absolutely no one in this house. Like I have nieces and nephews and everything. And he's like, yeah, I love you. We got FaceTime. We have to, like Takia was talking about the culture shift, or it was Cindy. It was one of them who said the culture shift is shifting, and we just have to get on top of that. Like if the boundary is, okay, well, you have to stay in the house for 2 weeks in order for us to see each other, then that is the consensus that both of you would have to come up with. But I think it's all about compromise and understanding who wants to see who, why, for how long, and how you're going to figure that out. Because if something does happen to either one of you, it would be hard for each one of you to go through. So I think just having those compromises and having those conversations are very important.
I want to stay with you for a second, because we do have some questions about dating, and this is absolutely in the wheelhouse of what you guys talk about when, at the breakup summit or in various lessons. Depending on people's age and where they were, a lot of people left a college situation, let's say, and I have a friend whose daughter left college and left a relationship, and then it's like, see ya, 2022. I don't know. We don't know, right? I mean, like, these are all big questions. And we've had a lot of mental health professionals suspect what is going on in the minds of younger people. Every time I say that, I feel like I'm getting older and older. As I say younger people, that I'm like slowly, this is like this important time, right? To bond with friends and develop relationships. And I'm wondering sort of what the messaging is among you, and what Start Strong is even doing to talk to people about this gap that we're facing, how to stay in touch how to start new relationships, is, you know, what's possible right now, and, you know, how do we keep ourselves healthy, you know, emotionally during a time that suddenly feels like the pause button has been pressed.
I personally, I can't say, because I grew up with technology. I grew up in this generation of, we're always FaceTiming. I'm on my friends. We're on Zoom all the time. Like it makes my mother mad. She's like, you're always on your phone. I'm like, but I was always out. So like, like, what am I supposed to do now? So it's all about like in containing that boundary. Someday my mom's like, okay, like you got to read a book for an hour. Like you got to put the phone down, like put everything down. Like let's have this conversation. And it's important. But I don't know. I can't really speak on to like relationships that everyone's going through, but like all my friends, we Zoom, we FaceTime, there's Snapchat, there's just so many different mediums. There's now Netflix Party where you can have a screen on and you and your friends, we chat every night. We're watching Netflix together, binging a show. So I think that my generation is very good at adapting to change, understanding that this is the reality that we live in. There's nothing we can do about it, but here's the solution that we can create. And to a lot of us, it's like, yeah, I miss my friends, but I love my parents more. Like it's like a lot of that too. So personally in my generation, and even like Bumble recently came out with this thing where you can like go on a date with somebody virtually if you like click a button and like you choose that person. So there's so much that social media is evolving and creating and doing so that we're able to have these face-to-face conversations. And it's difficult to have a conversation over text. And I don't know anybody that does that. I still don't text a lot. Like I still, every single chance I get, I FaceTime somebody. So I just personally think that for me and my friends, we're good. We're doing okay.
No, I mean, this reader Rachel asks, what do I do if a potential date from an app wants to meet in person, but I want to have a video chat first? How do you know when you should move forward with meeting a date in person, and what's the best way to set boundaries around that? So if this is something that came up in you know, in one of your programs, I don't know who wants to field that one. Yeah.
So like Manae just said, a lot of the younger people have been very much used to engaging with online platforms for their dating experiences and things like that. And where Start Strong really intersects with that is we are kind of helping young people to facilitate their thinking around what's too much, what's not too much, what is okay, what do I like about this, what do I want from this experience, what do I not want? So it might be like, okay, do I want this person to follow me on all of my social media platforms just yet? Do I want to have a joint Instagram or something with this person? Are there certain things that I want to block them from? You know, I have like a close friends network that can see all of my stuff and then maybe not with the other things. And so we really just try to help young people think about, just like this viewer is asking, when do I decide if this is okay, if I want to take the next step or not? Kind of fielding out when you want to kind of invite someone more intimately into your online social media life and presence. So for the person that wrote in, I would just say, maybe just some more conversation. I'm like, yeah, I would love to see you sometime for coffee or something like that. But I would rather us maybe, why don't we have a few FaceTime dates first? Why don't you cook a dinner? I'll cook a dinner. We'll do that together. We'll sit down. We'll have a glass of wine. We'll talk. There are ways that we can kind of have this date and have it be informal, but from a space that, we both can feel comfortable in until we're ready to like maybe go on a hike together or something like that.
Maybe you take 2 weeks off from other things and then maybe get together. Yeah, it's all this planning.
Absolutely.
But I do think, I think that the longer this goes on, the more we are going to have to sort of long-term plan. Okay, I want to see this person, then this is my quarantine time, then I'll see them, then this is my quarantine time again. And I have a lot of talks with friends about the winter, and if we sort of get shut inside again, who will be in my bubble? What does it mean? Like how will we do this? What will be yeah. And
I also think it's important to like recognize the warning signs at first. So if you say, well, I'm not comfortable with that, and that person's like, well, no, that is a warning sign. Recognize that they are not respecting your boundaries at first. Like if you, especially at the beginning of anything, any relationship that you have with anyone, whether that be like a parent, a friend, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a non-binary relationship, just remember that your boundaries come first before theirs. Like your life comes first before anybody else's, especially if your life is in danger. So always think about that first. A warning sign is something that we talk about, like something to look out in a relationship. So especially if someone's at the beginning, like Takia said, if you're not comfortable, you're not comfortable. I would suggest like writing your boundaries down, writing what you're okay with and not okay with. And as soon as somebody does something that you're not okay with, it's okay to just break that off, because clearly they're not respecting you. So it's all about those conversations you have to have within yourself. And I think a lot of times we're not having those conversations within ourselves. We're not understanding our own boundaries. I still don't know all of mine yet. I still don't know all of my deal breakers. It's a daily thing that I constantly go through. So just having those conversations with yourself about what you are comfortable with and what you aren't comfortable with, I think is very, very, very important, because you deserve respect and you deserve someone who respects you from the first instance you guys connect.
I love that. That's such good advice for life, right? Like anyone who you're talking to should be really open to, I hope somebody from Start Strong, as they enter the world and think of all these different wonderful mental health professions, that someone says, I want to write an advice column, because good, this is solid information. But yeah, you want the person to hear you and hear your concerns. And I think that especially right now, one of the first things I did when the weather got a little nicer was walk up to Jamaica Pond. And it was so crowded that I like started running home. I mean, I turned around and was like scared. I started running home, and this idea that I don't know how I'm gonna feel yet. I'll know when I get there. And I reserve the right to just turn around is so important right now. I wanna talk about the letter that ran in Love Letters today, because once again, this is super in the wheelhouse of Start Strong. It is not the first letter I've received about this. It was from someone who had heard from an ex. This is an ex that had cheated on them, had the relationship had become rather toxic, and at some point this letter writer had cut the person off, now is in a much better place, feels great, hears from this ex. The ex even sends flowers to the person's workplace, which was public. This letter writer said they feel completely physically safe, that there was no concern about anybody showing up, but they said this rattled them a little bit, because there was an apology note. There was, clearly this person was going through a pandemic period of reflection. And when it started, I was like, I'm going to give people about 3 to 4 weeks, and then they're going to start texting their exes and calling their exes. And I've seen friends of all ages make that call or send that text or receive it. And what would you tell people who are thinking about reaching out to people from their past, whether it's because they've realized they've processed it and have something very important to say, an apology perhaps, whether they missed that person, whether they are bored? How do you know when that is appropriate? And also from the other side, when you should pick up the phone? This is like prime breakup summit stuff, I think.
Yeah, I'll take the first go, and then if the team wants to add, they can. I empathize with that. I've had a couple of partners that have had their fun, and I wasn't having fun while they were having theirs. So I think it's amazing that this person, it sounds like they're self-reflecting and figuring out that maybe they had made some whoopsies, and it sounds like they wanted to communicate that. And we often bring up the phrase intent versus impact. And this might be one of those cases where the person had intentions of X, Y, and Z, but the opportunity that they missed is that you can self-reflect privately, and those can be inside thoughts, and you can share those with your friends or other close people, and you don't necessarily have to invite the person that you hurt in on those conversations. That self-growth can happen independently without them knowing. And that can, be beautiful in and of itself when you find out that you're growing and getting a little bit better. And then maybe someday they'll see you on social media. But until then, you can kind of take pride in that independently. The other thought is to think about going to what Maneja was saying about some warning signs or unhealthy moments. And we actually use storytelling to teach something called the wave of abuse, which is similar to the cycle of abuse, but a wave looks cooler on paper, and it also demonstrates how the trajectory can ebb and flow over time with how a person is behaving and reacting to certain situations. And so this sounds like a repeated pattern of behavior. So even though there was a pretty long gap, or like the water was pretty tranquil for a while, that wave has returned now because they're sending a new message, and now it's coming with flowers, which is conveniently in the wave of abuse story called the hearts and flowers stage, where they try to send a gift to undo their wrongdoings. And that's unfortunate because it also, in doing that, consciously or not, shifts the accountability to the person who's been hurt. And that's unfair, and that inserts a power dynamic that isn't going to be helpful for a relationship. I know there were more components to that question, so I want to make sure that my team answers if they want to.
Anyone have advice for this letter writer? And I should mention, by the way, that the contact was 2 texts within 12 hours, which means the person had not given the letter writer 24 hours to even digest the text. The letter writer believes that the flowers were probably sent a week before to get there when the text would arrive. So that's sort of what they're dealing with.
Yes. So, wonderful for bringing up the wave of abuse and kind of really demonstrating for us how that works in relationships and therefore after. If I were talking to the flower sender or texter, what I would say is, why do you need to contact this person? Like, you need to maybe do a little bit more thinking about, like, is this about a need that you have to be forgiven? And that you need this person to give you that, because again, that is more sort of like about yourself and like ego and things like that, versus like what your self-growth is looking like and like where you're really at. And if you really, really feel the need to communicate with the person, then and the way to do that would be maybe asking that person's permission to have that conversation. I've done some reflecting and I have some things that I would like to share with you, but I realize that you may not be in the space or have the bandwidth to want to do this, nor do you have to. But if you wouldn't mind, please let me know what that might look like for you and how I can do that in a way that is respectful of your boundaries. That is much more about like stating what you would like to have happen, but again, allowing the power and the agency to rest with the person that you are asking for to be invited into that conversation. So there's that. And then for the person who is the receiver of these text messages and flowers and things like that, I think it would just be a reminder of, I understand this person has reached out and they did the thing. You do not owe an explanation or a response to anything. And that it's okay that, because sometimes we feel like maybe it's rude. You know, this person has reached out, they're sending me text messages, they gave me a gift. Do I owe something? Should I just at least acknowledge that I got it? Like, I don't know. And it's like, this person inserted themselves into your life without your permission. So you get to decide whether or not that is something that you want to continue to engage in, if that is something that is healthy for you, if you would like to do that. And if you choose that you do not, that is okay as well, because this person came over here without asking. So, you know, you don't owe anybody anything. So while whatever their intentions are, whatever the gesture may be, it doesn't mean that you on the other end are indebted to that person, regardless of whatever the type of gesture was.
It's such a gift you saying that, because I think so many people worry about being rude. I hear that a lot from letter, like I've heard from this person, I don't want to be rude. It seems rude to ignore, but you're right. They didn't get the invite to show up to begin with. So that's a good thing to remember. But we've talked about, I know we have to wrap up soon. We've talked about some resources. Are there places where viewers and readers can go to sort of get some of these tools? Is your website the place to go? When talking about some of these issues about boundaries, and we can always, if you want to give me something later, I can send it out to everybody who RSVP'd today. But any sites that people should visit, or books people should check out, or work that you guys have done? I know the halls is a great place to start, but anything you want to share with everyone?
Yeah, I'll kick it off and then I'll pass it over to our team to share more resources. But the two that come to mind, Takia mentioned thehallsboston.com. That's a great opportunity to check out our web series, which starts conversations around unpacking unhealthy masculinity and relationships. There's 2 seasons, but if having those conversations is difficult, you can just sit down, enjoy a really well-produced movie, 2 seasons worth. You can binge it in one night. It's quality, and you'll get some learning done unintentionally. You can also check out our Start Strong website, which is bphc.org/startstrong. And if you click the resource tab, you'll be able to find all of our media literacy tools that Takia mentioned, so that you can start unpacking your media literacy diet.
Anyone else?
Also, just to start having conversations with the people around you, just very slowly. I know that me and my dad have a lot of conflicting views, but what I like to do is just talk, like put on a news station and talk about something, set the boundaries beforehand, like you're not allowed to yell, I'm not allowed to yell, you're not allowed to say this, I'm not allowed to say that. And I do it with all of my family members now. And it's something I recently began to just do, because I feel like a lot of the times, like our thoughts get lost in just trying to prove each other wrong. So what I do is that, so just because I personally don't like to read, I like to have conversations with people in order to get like the real things, because I feel like there's a lot of ableism and there's a lot of things we do with like celebrities and authors and people who have a platform. We feel like they're right because they wrote this book and like people bought it. But like, where are these conversations coming from? Who are we actually talking to? Who are the people that we're actually talking to on the ground, who we speak to every day? So I think having those personal conversations about boundaries, starting with the people closest to you, and then moving out, so that you're able, if you're comfortable to do it in my household, I'm comfortable to do it everywhere. And just learning how to do that from then. So I think that books and everything is great, but it's also a lot of self-reflecting too.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Anyone else before we close out?
I think another thing too. Oh
no, go on.
Yeah, I think going along with what Maneja was saying, you know, just understanding too that, you know, I mean, there's the whole saying like, don't go to bed angry, you know, as if like you have to solve everything in one sitting, but that's not necessarily true. You know, when you find, like, as Jess was saying, like if something in your tummy doesn't feel right, then it's okay to say, hey, let's shelve this for a later time when we both cool down, or when we both take some time to reflect a little bit more on what things were said and how we can say it in a way that is both empathetic and also understanding the other person. So, you know, I think that's huge when we start to talk about, you know, conversations about boundaries. Is like, you know, practice that, you know, just take time.
I want to thank everybody so much. Start Strong does such a good job with like bringing such complicated issues that should be simple and making them simple again. This idea of starting in your own home and then it will probably extend to the rest of your world is pretty important. And I do hope that the conversations that are coming out of this pandemic help us be better to each other at all times, and to be more sensitive and empathetic to needs that go past our own. And the advice you all gave today is pretty incredible. So I'm incredibly grateful for your time and your Zoom quality hour. And for everybody who RSVP'd today, I'm going to send out a note that will give links to Start Strong. I highly recommend listening to season 1 of the Love Letters podcast, which I believe is episode 4, that features Start Strong. I think the episode is called Cloudy with a Chance of Breakups. And you can hear more expertise about what we can learn about breakups from Start Strong there. And again, thank you so much for coming, and thanks to everybody for watching. This will help me navigate July 4th weekend a whole lot. So I'm very grateful. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks so much, Meredith. Thanks, everyone.